What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? That was the question spinning through Ava Thompson's mind as the rain thudded against the roof of the cheap motel room she'd been living in for the past 6 days. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched a worn photograph of Elon Musk, clipped from a magazine and folded into a corner of her cracked wallet. The image was old, showing him mid-laugh, wind-blown, with eyes that looked like they'd seen failure and still chose forward. Ava hadn't laughed in months. Her startup had failed. Her marriage had crumbled. Her savings account now had less than $40. She stared out the window as a semi-truck howled down the freeway, a loud reminder that the world kept moving whether she was in it or not. She reached into her glove compartment and pulled out an old, beaten-up leather notebook with a single word embossed on the front in gold, Game Theory. She had no memory of packing it, no memory of even owning it, but it was there, and inside the front cover, in hurried handwriting that looked eerily like her own, were the words, Elon's secret. Use only if you have nothing left. It wasn't a joke. Not to her. Not now. She sat back on the lumpy mattress and turned the page. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The first page was handwritten with strange bullet points and fragments of logic problems, minimax decision rule, Nash equilibrium, first principles, best practices. But one line stood out in heavy ink and double underline, life is not fair, but it is a game. Learn the rules, and you'll win. She blinked hard, like waking up from a dream. The word stirred something dormant in her chest. Her phone buzzed, another rejection email. Ava had applied to 53 tech jobs in the last 3 weeks. She had been a senior product engineer once. Had led teams. Raised rounds. Been a keynote speaker. Now she couldn't even get a callback. Her stomach growled. She took a sip of stale motel coffee and opened the notebook again. If Elon Musk could go from couch surfing to launching rockets, maybe game theory was more than just economics and probability charts. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was exactly what she needed. But first, she had to get out of the spiral. She shoved her phone into her bag, grabbed the notebook, and walked to the closest diner across the street, stepping through puddles as rain soaked her jeans. The smell of burnt toast and dish soap welcomed her like an old friend. She ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner booth, flipping to the second page, play to the edge. Comfort kills hunger. It sounded like something Elon would say in an interview, detached and bold. But Ava didn't feel bold. She felt exhausted. Still, the phrase kept echoing in her head. Maybe, she thought, it wasn't about pretending to be strong. Maybe it was about playing even when you're weak. She opened her laptop, typed Game Theory in Everyday Life into the search bar, and dove down a rabbit hole of strategies, simulations, and famous real-world applications. For the first time in months, her mind lit up. She read about prisoners' dilemmas, tit-for-tat algorithms, risk matrices. She thought about her job interviews. About her ex-husband. About the investors who ghosted her. Every memory slotted into a framework she hadn't noticed before. She realized something chilling: she hadn't lost because she was bad. She'd lost because she was playing someone else's game. That night, back at the motel, Ava drew a map. A literal mind map of her life, with branches for tech, relationships, finances, emotional health. Next to each branch she scribbled tactics from the notebook, probability trees for job outcomes, payoff matrices for how to spend her last bit of cash, feedback loops for rebuilding trust. The notebook wasn't just a relic of a once hopeful mind. It was a playbook. And she was done losing. But strategy alone couldn't buy dinner. She listed things she could sell: an old hard drive, and used tech gear, books. She posted everything on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. She signed up for short freelance gigs, data entry, content review, even remote tutoring. She would not beg. She would bargain. 2 days later, Ava had $170 and a new place to stay, a spot in a shared co-living unit in Oakland with a kitchen, desk, and decent Wi-Fi. Her new roommates were odd, but they didn't ask questions. That night, while others partied in the common area, Ava sat at her desk and reread the notebook again, circling a phrase that now burned into her core: if you can't win the game, change the rules. If you can't change the rules, change the board. She began writing her own rules underneath it. Rule 1, no assumptions. Rule 2, all relationships are strategic. Rule 3, the best move is often invisible. She began to observe people differently, watching their tone, micro-expressions, power dynamics. She ran simulations in her head before interviews. She framed questions not to get answers, but to control narratives. She wasn't manipulating, she was playing. And for the first time in forever, she felt like she had control. Still, the loneliness didn't go away. It gnawed at her, quiet and constant. One night, while walking back from a coffee shop, she saw a man on a street corner yelling at a crowd of no one. Something about false patterns in markets. She almost walked past, but paused. He wore a jacket with a faded Tesla logo. She offered him a coffee. He looked at her like she was insane. Then he nodded. His name was Tony, and he used to work in aerospace R&D at SpaceX. He'd burned out last year after a failed prototype got him blamed for millions in losses. Now he wandered, brilliant and broken. They talked for hours that night. About systems, failure, ambition. He asked what she was working on, and when she told him, he said, "That's not crazy. That's the realest thing I've heard in months." Tony moved into the co-living unit the next week. Together, they dissected the notebook, layer by layer. It wasn't just personal philosophy, it was tactical resilience. Ava felt the game change beneath her feet. She was no longer playing defense. She was building an offense. On the last page of the notebook, she found a postscript she hadn't noticed before. It read, "The smartest people aren't the ones with the best answers. They're the ones with the best questions." She stared at that line for a long time. Because she had a question now. One that burned hot in her chest, one she couldn't ignore anymore. What if this wasn't just about surviving? What if it was about building something better, stronger, not despite the pain, but because of it? Ava closed the notebook. She wasn't done yet. She was just getting started. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before the notebook, before the rain-soaked motel and half-finished coffee in roadside diners, Ava Thompson had a life most people envied. Her story used to begin in the glossy lobbies of Silicon Valley startups, where her name was known in more than a few rooms. She was born in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of town where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and the biggest local scandal was the high school quarterback getting caught drinking in the parking lot. Her father, a machinist, taught her how to take things apart and rebuild them before she could spell engineer. Her mother, an elementary school teacher with a soft voice and a relentless backbone, taught her how to question everything gently but thoroughly. Ava was quiet, observant, brilliant without showing off. Her younger brother, Josh, was loud and wild, a tangle of trouble and charm. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14, and from then on, Ava took on the unspoken job of holding the house together. She learned how to keep people calm, how to keep peace. She also learned that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, people break anyway. Her first love was code. Not people. Not money. Just clean logic. Cause and effect. Action and reaction. There was comfort in that clarity. She graduated early, full scholarship to MIT, and by 25 she was already one of the youngest lead engineers at a hot predictive AI company in San Francisco. She married Marcus Turner, a tall, magnetic design lead with a mile-wide smile and a talent for pitching ideas that didn't yet exist. At first, they were a power couple. He sketched. She built. They talked about IPOs the way some couples talked about vacations. But slowly, cracks formed. Ava didn't like parties. Marcus didn't like silence. She wanted code reviews. He wanted champagne launches. Still, they kept building. Ava co-founded her own startup, Insight Loop, an AI platform that detected emotional tone in user feedback to help companies improve customer support. It was technical, elegant, and powerful. Investors were intrigued. Money flowed in. So did pressure. When the first big contract fell through, Marcus blamed her algorithms. When the second did, she started blaming herself. She stayed up nights writing fixes, patching edge cases, burning out her team with pivots. Then came the layoff cycle, the board's silent withdrawal, and the final crushing blow. Marcus used her code base as a starting point for his own stealth company. He'd been prepping the move for months. One day, he simply said, "I need to think bigger, Ava. We're holding each other back." He packed 2 duffel bags and left with her IP, her investor list, and her heart. The betrayal was surgical. She was angry, but mostly she felt stupid. Stupid for not seeing it sooner. Stupid for believing in the myth of shared ambition. In the weeks that followed, she spiraled. Her mom, who had been her quiet emotional lifeline, passed suddenly from a stroke. Josh, her brilliant, broken brother, tried to be there, but grief made his moods volatile. They argued. Loudly. And then stopped talking altogether. The silence was louder than the fights. Ava withdrew from her world. She tried therapy. Tried journaling. Nothing worked. The venture world moved on without her. Marcus's new company was on TechCrunch within 4 months. Her name wasn't mentioned once. Her apartment lease expired. Her bank balance sank. She couldn't even afford to crash on anyone's couch without feeling like dead weight. She packed what she could into her hatchback and told herself she was taking a break. In reality, she had no plan. Just motion. Just escape. That's how she ended up in the motel on the edge of the freeway with no roadmap, no job, and no one to call. But even in those moments, those hollow, quiet, numb moments, something inside her wouldn't let go. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the faint whisper of her mother's voice in her head saying, "You're not done." Ava always believed that everything in her life had a function, even the pain. She used to draw diagrams to explain it to herself, pain as data, failure as feedback, emotion as unprocessed signal. She used to say it in interviews, even, "People call it failure. I call it unfinished analysis." It used to sound inspiring. Now it felt like a lie. Until she found the notebook. That strange, weathered, half-coded, half-crazy notebook that someone, maybe her past self, had written with a kind of desperate genius. Inside were diagrams that reminded her of research papers she'd read in college. Equations she half remembered from graduate lectures. But it wasn't theoretical. It was emotional. Strategic. Personal. Page after page was filled with notes about how to interpret chaos through patterns, how to respond to betrayal not with despair but with structured reframing. Ava didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in math. And the math said that even the worst scenario could be modeled, analyzed, and optimized. The night she began rewriting her mental algorithms was the night she stopped waiting for someone to rescue her. She created a spreadsheet called the Recovery Framework. On one tab, financials. How much cash she needed per week to survive. What she could sell. What she could do. On another tab, identity. She listed every skill she had, not by job title, but by utility, pattern recognition, user psychology, back-end architecture, persuasive copywriting. Then came the emotional layers. She mapped her relationships, past, present, broken, and possible, and next to each, she added a risk-reward column. Not to dehumanize them, but to understand why she kept trusting the wrong people and burning out with the right ones. In doing so, she uncovered a central truth she had avoided for years: she didn't just fear failure. She feared irrelevance. And that fear had driven her to partner with people who made her feel temporarily visible, even when they chipped away at her core. It wasn't just Marcus. It was bosses who took credit for her code, investors who made her feel small before offering money, co-workers who praised her talent but dismissed her leadership. She wasn't just unlucky. She was unguarded. She had played for connection instead of position. That was going to change. But Ava knew she couldn't go full shark. That wasn't her. She wasn't trying to become cold. She just wanted to become conscious. She didn't need to win every round. She just needed to stop folding before the cards were dealt. And slowly, that fire returned. It wasn't the blind confidence of her 20s. It was quieter, sharper. She reread Elon's biography like scripture. Not because he was perfect, but because he was relentless. He'd been doubted. Mocked. Broke. But he never stopped. He saw the world as a game that rewarded courage more than caution. Ava wanted that. Not the fame. Not the money. Just the clarity. The notebook became her new center. She carried it everywhere. Took notes in the margins. Annotated ideas. She created flashcards of game theory concepts and applied them to daily decisions: what gigs to accept, what calls to return, what conversations to risk. When people asked her what she was working on, she said, "A system for emotional survivability." Most of them laughed. One didn't. A woman named May, whom Ava met at a public library workshop on behavioral economics. May was a former crypto strategist turned burnout casualty. Brilliant, dry-humored, and suspicious of everyone. But when Ava shared a few diagrams from the notebook, May leaned in. "This is not stupid," she said. "It's tactical empathy. You're turning your mind into a predictive model." They became allies. Not quite friends. Not yet. But something real. May moved into the co-living space after Ava vouched for her. They started whiteboarding ideas late into the night, debating systems, gamifying coping strategies. Ava started writing code again. Slowly. Not for an employer. For herself. For something new. And one night, looking at the sketches, she whispered the first real name for what she was building. Gamify grief. May raised an eyebrow. "That's dark." Ava smiled. "So's life. But what if we could track progress in pain like we track it in workouts? What if healing had metrics?" May was quiet for a moment. Then nodded. "You might be onto something." For the first time since everything fell apart, Ava felt the faint outline of a future that didn't make her chest tighten. She didn't know exactly where the story was going, but for the first time, she wasn't waiting for the plot to happen to her. She was writing it. Rejection had a rhythm to it. At first, it slammed into you, hard and loud, like a car crash you didn't see coming. Then it settled in like background noise: inbox dings, auto-responses, polite no thank yous, and unanswered follow-ups that felt more cruel than the actual rejections. Ava had grown almost numb to them. Almost. Each morning she woke up early in her shared room, half her things still in plastic bins, and began her routine: coffee, email refresh, resume tweaks, another 5 to 10 applications fired into the void. At first, she tailored each one carefully, writing unique cover letters and checking the job posts for hidden keywords. After a week, she had a template. After 2, she just changed the company name and hit send. And every single time she hoped. That dull, stupid hope. Hoped that someone would see her not as a laid-off founder, or damaged goods, but as someone brilliant, ready, useful. Most didn't. The interviews that came were awkward and forced. A recruiter would ask what happened at Insight Loop, and Ava would hesitate for a fraction of a second, just long enough for them to hear the unspoken mess behind her careful words. She had the pedigree, the experience, the skills. But people sensed failure. Not the inspiring kind. The contagious kind. Word got around in tech circles fast. Marcus's version of the story was already out there. Ava was too technical, too rigid, not good with people, obsessed with details. She'd steered the company into the weeds. He told it with charm and regret, like someone recounting a heartbreak that wasn't their fault. And Ava couldn't argue with it, not publicly. That wasn't her style. Besides, it wouldn't change anything. Her inbox kept filling with polite versions of, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." She tried to let it roll off. She focused on the notebook, on May's encouragement, on the concept for gamify grief. But rejection still stung, especially when it came from people she used to mentor or colleagues who used to praise her work in front of conference rooms. One day, she saw a job post from a startup she'd helped raise seed funding for years ago. She messaged the new head of product directly. They didn't reply. Instead, they took down the job post. 2 days later, it reappeared with different language, clearly tailored to someone else. Someone not her. It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure. May tried to be supportive. "People don't know what to do with resilience," she said over takeout noodles one night. "They like underdogs until the underdogs don't stay under." It helped. A little. But late at night, Ava stared at the ceiling and wondered if maybe everyone else was right. Maybe she really had lost it. Her edge. Her instincts. Her magic. Then came the message. It was slid under the door of her co-living room, scribbled in black ink on a torn piece of printer paper, "The rules aren't broken. You're playing the wrong game." There was no name. No signature. Just that single line. She blinked at it for a long time. May swore she didn't do it. Neither did Tony, the Tesla dropout who'd become Ava's third reluctant confidant. No one in the house admitted to it. And yet, it felt like a direct hit. It echoed something deep in her bones. Like someone had read the thoughts she wasn't brave enough to say aloud. She folded the paper into the notebook and kept going. But that line, it stuck. It changed how she viewed every application, every meeting, every algorithm of modern professional life. If she wasn't failing because she was wrong, maybe she was failing because she was using a rulebook written for someone else's game. That night, she flipped through the notebook again, stopping at a scribbled passage that once felt abstract but now hit like prophecy. "In zero-sum environments, don't compete, redefine the payoff. Change the metric. Change the motive." She realized she'd been playing for approval. For reinstatement. For permission. She needed to stop applying. Not because she was giving up, but because she was done asking. She was going to start building. Gamify Grief had started as a sketch, a way to map personal growth like game levels. But now, Ava saw something deeper. Pain wasn't a bug. It was a feature. If people could track their recovery the way they tracked fitness or finances, maybe they'd heal faster. Or at least stop feeling lost. She told May she wanted to build a beta version. May said they'd need capital. Ava said they'd build first, raise later. May rolled her eyes but nodded. They began wireframing that night, arguing about features and flow. They brought Tony in for his UX insight, and within a week, they had a prototype. Crude, ugly, but functional. Users would log moments of emotional stress and get feedback based on cognitive behavior loops and probabilistic optimism metrics, concepts drawn straight from the notebook. It sounded insane. But when they showed it to a few friends, no one laughed. In fact, they asked to try it. The rejection emails didn't stop. But Ava stopped caring. She wasn't asking anymore. She was choosing. Then came another blow. Marcus's new company announced a funding round. $30 million. He was on CNBC, talking about emotional intelligence engines and automated empathy. Ava almost choked. The words. The phrases. They were hers. He'd stolen not just code, but language, concepts she'd developed, frameworks she'd pitched. And now the world called him a genius. May was furious. "You want me to leak the emails?" she asked. Ava shook her head. "He's already won the first half. I'm building the second." That night, someone tagged her in a tweet from a former investor. It said, "When you bet on the wrong founder, you learn a hard lesson. When the right founder walks away, you miss a miracle." It had no names. But she knew who it was for. That small, silent validation did more for Ava than any job offer could have. It reminded her she hadn't imagined her past success. She hadn't hallucinated her impact. She just hadn't finished her story. But the hits kept coming. The next week, Ava presented their beta product to a microfund she once pitched to with Insight Loop. The partner nodded through the whole presentation, asked sharp questions, seemed engaged. Then he smiled and said, "It's a compelling idea. But the market for grief is tricky. Maybe a man would bring more emotional objectivity." Ava stared at him. May's knuckles went white. They walked out without a word. In the parking lot, Ava screamed into the sky. Not because she was shocked, but because she wasn't. That was the worst part. She expected it. She wasn't even hurt anymore. Just tired. May tossed her a bottle of water and said, "Okay. That's the last one. No more suits. We find our own way." Ava nodded. They launched a closed beta 2 weeks later. Just 10 users. Hand-picked. People who'd experienced real loss, job loss, family loss, health battles. The feedback came in fast. "This feels like someone understands me. I didn't know I could measure this. It's like therapy, but gamified." Ava cried quietly the night she read that last one. Because for the first time in months, something she made helped someone else. Not a company. A person. That was her win. That was her metric. She opened the notebook again. On the back cover, faded and half-smeared, were 4 words she hadn't noticed before: "Stay in the game." She stared at them like they were sacred. Because now, finally, she knew she could. And she would. Winning feels nothing like you expect it to. It's not cinematic. There's no music swelling, no triumphant fist in the air. For Ava, winning was sitting alone on a folding chair in a shared kitchen at 3:47 a.m. Staring at her laptop screen as the 10th beta user completed the onboarding flow without a single glitch. She didn't cheer. She didn't even smile. She just let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for weeks. The product worked. It actually worked. Not perfectly, there were still bugs, clunky UI edges, a dozen features duct taped together with code she'd borrowed from old side projects, but it functioned. It tracked stress signals, mapped behavior loops, surfaced reflection prompts, and used simple feedback logic to reward emotional processing. It gave people structure inside chaos. And most importantly, it didn't patronize them. Users weren't treated like patients. They were treated like players. Ava called them navigators. The entire app spoke in game theory terms: moves, momentum, setbacks, recovery paths. The grief wasn't erased, it was mapped. Tangible. Measurable. May said the app felt dangerously personal. Tony said it was like giving a roadmap to a part of the mind that usually lived in fog. Ava just knew it worked because she used it on herself every day. But every move has a cost. With early traction came attention, and attention meant pressure. Some of it was good, referrals from users, glowing texts from strangers who'd heard about it through whispers in support groups or private Slack communities. But some of it was not. One afternoon, Ava got a call from a man she hadn't spoken to in almost a year. "Ava," he said, his voice slow and warm like a fire you didn't trust. "It's Rick. Rick Carter. One of her earliest investors. He'd put in $250,000 during Insight Loop's pre-seed round, praised her as the next breakout mind, then ghosted the moment things turned hard. Now he wanted to talk. Heard you're working on something new. I've got folks in the mental wellness space asking questions." Ava felt a flash of ice in her spine. It's not a company yet. Just a tool. That's how all companies start. He offered coffee. She said no. He offered a Zoom. She paused, then said yes. Curiosity is expensive. The next day, she logged in and found Rick flanked by two strangers, one a venture partner at a digital health fund, the other a strategic advisor with a fake smile LinkedIn aura. Rick talked smooth, talked fast, asked loaded questions. "What's the TAM on grief, Ava? Do you have a monetization strategy? Do you own the IP?" Ava kept her face still, her answers measured. May sat just off screen, texting her live reactions. "This is a Shark Tank," she typed. "Don't bleed." When Rick offered to help structure a real raise, Ava thanked him and left it vague. She ended the call with a headache and a pit in her stomach. Later that night, she opened the notebook again. Page 63. Every offer is a move. Every yes costs something. She wrote it down again, this time in red ink. She wouldn't sell her vision to someone who thought pain was a product category. She wouldn't turn her recovery into someone else's portfolio win. But the tension grew. May, practical as ever, reminded her, we still need a real dev team. A back end that can scale. You can't carry this alone forever. Tony suggested a grant route, non-dilutive funding from mental health nonprofits. They applied to 5. 3 rejected them within a week. One asked if Ava had clinical psychology credentials. The last one ghosted. So Ava did what she always did, she adapted. She studied no-code platforms, relearned Python shortcuts, patched back-end fixes at 2 a.m. when servers hiccuped. May handled user messaging. Tony built behavior logic flows and tweaked onboarding. It wasn't sustainable. But it was moving. And then the email came. Subject line, feature request from Real Talk podcast. Ava's pulse spiked. Real Talk was one of the most influential mental health podcasts on the internet, half storytelling, half science, with millions of listeners. The host, a trauma-informed psychologist named Dr. Chloe Knight, had built a reputation for brutal honesty and high standards. She'd heard about Gamify grief through a friend who'd lost their spouse and used the app during the first 90 days after the funeral. Would love to chat, the email said. There's something here. People need this. Let's talk. The call was set for the next day. Ava barely slept. She scrubbed her room, rehearsed answers, rewrote her founder story 5 times. But Chloe wasn't interested in polish. The moment they connected, the psychologist said, "Tell me the moment you knew the old you had to die so the new you could show up." Ava blinked. Then answered. And kept answering. She told her about the notebook, the betrayal, the motel room, the jobs that disappeared, the strange line under the door. Chloe didn't interrupt. She just listened. When Ava finished, there was a long pause. Then Chloe said, "I want to do a full episode on you." Ava felt her hands go numb. Chloe continued. "But it has to be raw. Not a pitch. A reckoning. Can you do that?" Ava nodded. The episode went live 2 weeks later. Game Theory and Grief, How We Learn to Play Again. It didn't go viral. It did something better. It spread slowly, steadily, like a signal passed between those who needed it. Downloads doubled. User signups climbed. Ava's inbox flooded. Not with job offers, but with stories. Real ones. A father who lost his son to fentanyl. A teacher navigating chemo. A teenager who'd aged out of foster care and never knew grief had a name. Ava read every single one. Some twice. Some while crying. May read them too, silently. She didn't say much, just started building a community forum inside the app. Tony added a low mood tracker that offered small quests instead of passive prompts. The app wasn't just tracking grief now, it was guiding people through it. Ava began calling it an emotional GPS. You don't skip the hard parts, she told one new user during a support call. You just stop walking in circles. But momentum has a shadow. Growth brings scrutiny. One morning, Ava received a cease and desist email from a corporate firm claiming that their client, an AI-driven mental wellness platform backed by a major VC, was preparing to launch a product with similar functionality. The letter didn't name Gamify Grief, but the language was targeted. She knew who was behind it. Marcus. His company, now a media darling, had pivoted, predictive emotion management for enterprise teams. They were trying to patent language Ava had used in her original Insight Loop decks. Phrases like empathy scaffolding and cognitive progression mapping. He was trying to beat her again. But this time, she had something more than code. She had proof. She had stories. She had people. May wanted to fight. Tony wanted to go public. Ava said no, for now. He's trying to get us off mission, she told them. If we react, he owns the game. We don't let him. They doubled down. Launched new features. Added secure data encryption. Started building a waitlist for therapists and counselors who wanted a back-end dashboard to track client patterns. Gamify Grief was no longer just a tool. It was becoming a system. A new kind of emotional tech. Ava updated the notebook. Page 89. When attacked, don't defend, expand. She drew a new game board. A bigger one. One where Marcus couldn't follow. Because this wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about changing the game entirely. And Ava was ready to play. Sometimes evolution doesn't feel like growth. It feels like panic. It's a moment where everything that once made sense now threatens to collapse under its own weight, where what you've built becomes too small for what it's trying to hold. Ava knew they were close to that moment when the community forum May built hit 3,000 users in under a week. What started as a space for support and shared stories exploded into something wild and ungovernable. Grievers weren't just talking. They were guiding each other, posting mental health hacks, turning their trauma into something almost playful. I leveled up past crippling Sunday depression to made eye contact with a stranger at Trader Joe's, one user wrote. Reward, one cookie and a cry in the parking lot. Worth it. The replies rolled in like applause. That single thread was bookmarked over 700 times. Ava watched it happen in real time, equal parts amazed and terrified. They'd built a product, but the people were building a movement. And movements don't stay contained. Chloe Knight featured the forum in a follow-up episode. An article followed in a mid-tier tech newsletter, calling Gamify Grief an emotional UX breakthrough. Ava knew what would come next: copycats, critics, and the kind of attention that couldn't be quietly scaled. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was identity. Recovery. Redefinition. We're not a grief tool, Ava said aloud in the middle of their third late-night planning sprint. We're a transformation engine. Tony, bleary-eyed and chewing gummy worms, looked up. That's not a tagline, he muttered. That's a VC magnet. May didn't laugh. She was already typing. Her laptop glowed with new architecture models. So what's the actual pivot, she asked. New features? Or new framing? Ava closed her eyes and saw the game board from the notebook again. Not a flat path, but a layered stack. Pain. Reflection. Decision. Action. Progress. We help people build new selves, she said. Not just survive. Reconstruct. It sounded ambitious. Maybe arrogant. But it also felt true. The next 2 weeks blurred. They restructured the app around personal quests, daily moves that aligned with larger goals set by the user. These weren't fitness check-ins or gratitude lists. They were identity upgrades. One user, a 41-year-old teacher going through a divorce, labeled his goal, become someone who doesn't flinch at the word alone. Another, a 23-year-old barista in recovery from alcohol abuse, wrote, build a life I don't need to escape from. The app tracked their progress not with badges, but with personal reflections and decision logs. The UX rewarded honesty. Missed a quest. The app didn't scold. It asked why. Skipped a week. It offered a re-entry ramp. Ava called it gentle gamification. Tony called it psychological judo. May just called it smart. It worked. Users stayed. Not just for days, but for months. They returned not because they were broken, but because they were learning how to rebuild. Ava began calling it resilience training for real people. That line stuck. A few therapists on the waitlist reached out directly, asking if they could use it in group settings. One social worker in Minneapolis emailed, I run trauma workshops for single moms. This is the first app I've seen that doesn't talk down to them. Ava cried when she read it. Not loud. Just quiet, steady tears. The kind that come when you realize something you made actually matters. But success always invites a storm. One Tuesday morning, Ava woke up to 27 text messages. The first was from May. It just said, you need to see this. A Twitter thread from a well-known AI ethicist had gone viral overnight. The post, are we okay with apps turning human grief into game mechanics? What does it mean when mourning becomes monetized? What happens when pain is just another UX journey? Ava stared at the screen, numb. The thread wasn't just questioning the app. It was questioning her. Her motives. Her ethics. Her right to even try. She wanted to respond. Defend. Explain. But the notebook whispered again, when provoked, clarify mission. Not emotion. So she sat down and wrote a long, clear, public statement. She posted it to the app, to the website, and pinned it on social. Grief is not a game. But healing requires motion. We are not replacing therapists. We are not exploiting pain. We are building pathways for people who feel stuck. This is not gamification for profit. It is gamification for survival. She didn't include her credentials. She didn't name-drop Chloe or Rick or anyone else. Just the truth. Her inbox flooded again. This time, with support. A nurse who lost her partner to COVID. A retired vet with PTSD. A teenage boy whose father had walked out. Don't stop, they wrote. Don't let them make this go away. May put it bluntly that night, the backlash is proof the signal is working. Still, Ava felt it. The heat. The tension. The old fear, what if they're right? What if I'm just dressing up damage in pretty UX? But then she remembered that night in the motel. The first night she saw the notebook and felt something crack open inside her, not a break, but a map. It hadn't been a product then. It had been a lifeline. And maybe that's all it still was. A way forward. Not perfect. Not polished. But real. She got up. Opened her laptop. Started designing a new feature, descent mode. A setting for users in crisis. It slowed the app down. Removed all game elements. Offered one thing only, space to name the pain. Not fix it. Just name it. She rolled it out quietly. 2 days later, a user sent her a voice memo. Just 6 words, "Your app stopped me from drinking." Ava listened to it 4 times. Then she went to bed, holding the notebook like armor. Because now she understood something Marcus and Rick and all the noise could never grasp: this wasn't about disruption. It was about dignity. About building something for the people who live in the messy middle, after the loss, before the light. The place where every move costs something. But where every move, even the smallest one, still counts. Ava always assumed success would silence her critics. But as Gamify grief gained traction, she discovered something darker. Some people don't want you to succeed, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your survival reminds them of everything they've given up on. They're not villains. They're mirrors. And mirrors don't clap. The platform had just crossed 20,000 active users. What started as a lifeboat was now a real vessel, with sails catching wind she didn't fully understand. The new dashboard was live. Counselors were onboarding. A school district in Oregon was running a small pilot with their at-risk student population. Chloe Knight had called the app a roadmap for emotional literacy in the post-shame age. But not everyone saw it that way. Her mother didn't mention the app when they spoke. They'd only recently started speaking again, text exchanges every few weeks, a rushed birthday call, and then radio silence. The last time Ava mentioned what she was building, her mother's response was soft, almost surgical: "It's good that you're staying busy. Keeps the mind off things." No follow-up. No questions. Ava knew that tone. She'd grown up around it. Her mother didn't dislike ambition. She distrusted it. Especially when it came from women. Especially from her daughter. "Don't show off" had been gospel in their house. Stay small. Stay safe. Don't make people uncomfortable. Now Ava was doing all 3. She wasn't angry at her mother, not anymore. Just sad. Because she could finally see it, her mom wasn't trying to dim her light. She was afraid to step into her own. And Ava's brightness made that impossible to ignore. Then came Darren. Old college friend. More like an acquaintance. They'd shared a coding class and a few mutuals on LinkedIn. He reached out with a DM, "Saw the app. Surprised you're still in the game after the Insight Loop mess. Some people never learn, huh?" It wasn't sarcasm. It was cruelty, barely veiled. Ava didn't respond. She archived the message and closed her laptop. May noticed the silence later that night. "You've got that stare again," she said. "What happened?" Ava shook her head. "Nothing new. Just someone reminding me they're still rooting for the version of me that fails." May didn't blink. Then give them silence. Starve that version. Ava wished she could. But the people who don't clap always echo louder than the ones who cheer. It wasn't just former colleagues or critics either. Some of the early users, people who'd once flooded the app with gratitude, started pushing back. "I liked it better when it was simple. Why are you adding therapist dashboards? This was for us. Don't sell out." Ava read each comment carefully. She understood the fear. Growth often looks like betrayal when you're still hurting. People want safe spaces to stay exactly how they found them. But healing requires expansion. So Ava replied with care. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she wrote. "We're building more doors." Still, the doubt slithered in. Was she changing too much? Moving too fast? May noticed her hesitation. "You're playing small again," she said one night. "Stop apologizing for evolving." Tony agreed, in his own way. "The product has to outgrow its origin story. Just like you did." And Ava knew they were right. But her heart still flinched at every unsubscribed email, every passive-aggressive comment from someone who once called her brave. Then came a surprising invitation. TEDx San Francisco. A talk slot. They wanted her to tell the story, not of Gamify grief, but of how her fall became a framework. Ava hesitated. 4 days. May pushed. "If they want a story, give them the truth. Make the room shake." Tony added, but in a structured, well-timed, UX-friendly way. Ava smiled, despite herself. She agreed. But preparing for that stage forced her to confront something she'd avoided since the notebook first appeared, the ending. Not of the app. Of her old self. She stood alone in her room the night before the talk, staring into the mirror, rehearsing the last line. "The worst thing that ever happened to me," became the reason I now help other people get back up. But she couldn't say it with confidence. Not yet. So she opened the notebook, flipping through its worn pages. Notes, frameworks, diagrams, questions. But near the back, on a page she didn't remember writing, was a single sentence in deep black ink: "Your redemption doesn't need an audience." She froze. Because it was the truth she'd been circling all along. This wasn't about proving the doubters wrong. Or getting claps from people who'd never clap. It was about building something that would outlive her shame. That night, she restructured the entire talk. No buzzwords. No brand polish. Just a story. The betrayal, the grief, the motel, the note under the door, the rise, the slip, the rebuild. The day of the event, she wore no makeup. No slides. Just a worn black sweater and the notebook in her hand. She walked on stage and stood still for 3 full seconds. Then, what if everything that breaks you becomes the raw material for what you were meant to build? The audience leaned in. And Ava told them everything. She didn't cry. She didn't hold back. When she finished, the room didn't erupt. It paused, deep, breath-held silence, then slowly filled with applause. Not the thunderous kind. The sincere kind. And in the second row, she saw someone she didn't expect. Her mother. Eyes rimmed red, lips pressed together like holding in an earthquake. After the talk, they didn't hug. They didn't say much. But before leaving, her mother touched the notebook gently and whispered, "You made it useful." All that pain. And Ava understood something new. Even the people who don't clap might still be watching. Waiting. Wishing. Not everyone will cheer for you. Some will doubt, disappear, or derail. But your healing is not a performance. It's an evolution. And you never evolve for applause. You evolve for the life that comes next. When Ava finally understood that the real game wasn't about winning applause or avoiding failure, but about playing with intention, she knew she had to dig deeper. The notebook had been her anchor, but it was just the beginning. Now she needed a playbook, a hidden guide that would show her not just how to survive grief, but how to strategize life's challenges like a chess game, thinking 3 moves ahead. She called it the Hidden Playbook. It was no longer about random quests or gentle nudges, it was about layering tactics, risks, and calculated moves. Her next challenge was turning that abstract idea into something real, something the app could deliver. She invited May and Tony to a weekend retreat in the Redwood foothills, where Wi-Fi was weak but ideas flowed strong. They huddled around a fire pit, notebooks scattered on a weathered picnic table. Ava laid out her vision. What if grief is less about pain and more about decision-making? What if healing is a series of moves we learn to make, not a single event we survive? May nodded thoughtfully. Game theory, she said. Studying choices and outcomes. How people play when stakes are high. Tony's eyes lit up. Like a strategic game where the player's goal isn't just survival, but growth. They sketched models on napkins and tree bark. They imagined a choice tree users could navigate, where every decision led to new challenges and opportunities, like branching paths in a choose-your-own-adventure novel. The app would not just track progress, but adapt dynamically, offering custom moves based on the user's emotional state, history, and goals. It felt ambitious, maybe reckless. But Ava knew that if she wanted to truly honor the pain and resilience of her users, she had to do more than band-aid wounds. She had to empower them to become players in their own lives again. Back in the city, the real work began. May rewrote the backend to support adaptive narratives. Tony designed an interface that felt like a game board, but subtle, no flashy badges, just quiet encouragement. Ava spent nights refining the moves, crafting prompts that felt authentic and tough. Choose how you respond to rejection, one read. Decide when to ask for help. Pick a boundary you want to hold firm. Testing was a revelation. Users responded like they were waking up. One woman, a 34-year-old nurse, told Ava she finally understood why she kept reliving her mother's death, not because she hadn't healed, but because she hadn't changed her approach to grief. It was like trying to fix a broken vase by gluing the same pieces over and over, she said. Now I'm learning to build something new from the shards. The app became less about fixing pain and more about mastering moves, each choice a calculated step toward a future no longer dictated by loss. But with innovation came complexity. Some users felt overwhelmed. It's like chess, a young man wrote, but I'm still learning how to move the pieces. Ava realized they needed a guide within the guide, an introduction to game theory, translated for the everyday struggler. She wrote a series of short essays and videos called The Basics of Playing Your Life, where she explained concepts like risk, payoff, and strategy, all framed through stories of real people using the app. The response was immediate. People loved seeing their struggles framed as strategic moves rather than failures. It gave them agency, something Ava had craved when she first hit rock bottom. Yet not everyone embraced the change. Some longtime users pushed back, yearning for simplicity and comfort instead of strategy and challenge. Sometimes I just want to cry, one wrote. Not make a plan. Ava understood. Healing wasn't a linear game. It was chaotic and raw. So she built pause mode, allowing users to step back from strategy and just be, offering gentle space for emotion without judgment or tasks. It wasn't easy balancing rigor and compassion, but Ava knew both were necessary. One night, scrolling through user stories, Ava stumbled upon a thread titled, "Moves That Changed My Life." It was filled with testimonies, small decisions that led to big shifts. A woman who chose to call her estranged father after years of silence, a man who finally set boundaries at work, a teenager who asked for therapy instead of hiding. Each story was a reminder, this hidden playbook wasn't just theory. It was lived experience. Months later, a neuroscientist named Dr. Elaine Carter contacted Ava after reading about the app. She was researching decision-making under stress and wanted to collaborate. Their conversations opened new doors. Dr. Carter explained how trauma reshapes the brain's wiring, making some choices feel impossible. Together, they brainstormed ways to incorporate neuroscience-backed techniques into the app's moves, breathing exercises timed to decision points, prompts designed to reframe negative thought loops, and tools to strengthen cognitive flexibility. Ava realized the playbook wasn't static. It was alive, evolving with science and stories. It was a map, but also a compass. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a community call when a user shared something simple but profound. This app made me realize that sometimes the best move is not to move at all. That sentence echoed in Ava's mind. Strategy wasn't just about action. Sometimes it was about patience. Waiting. Reflection. And that, she thought, was the greatest secret of all. The hidden playbook wasn't about mastering life's challenges with brute force or blind optimism. It was about learning when to push, when to pause, and how to keep playing no matter the hand dealt. It was about reclaiming control in a world that often feels uncontrollable. The playbook wasn't perfect. It wasn't a quick fix. But it was real. It was a strategy born from loss and forged in resilience. And for Ava, that made all the difference. Because sometimes, the best way to beat life's challenges isn't by playing harder, but by playing smarter. Ava knew from the beginning that healing didn't happen in isolation. People needed each other, real connection, not just algorithms. The app had been a solitary refuge for many at first, but as users grew more engaged, a pattern emerged. The true power wasn't just in the moves or strategies but in the network effect, the way people uplifted each other, often without realizing it. It started small, like ripples from a stone dropped in a pond. A user would share a breakthrough, another would respond with encouragement. Conversations blossomed, private messages sent between strangers who suddenly felt less alone. Ava realized they were tapping into something primal, community as survival. To foster this, May suggested integrating a peer-to-peer support system where users could opt in to become guides for others further back on the journey. It wasn't therapy or professional counseling, but a space for shared empathy and practical advice. Ava hesitated at first. Could they trust users to support each other without harm? But the alternative, isolated suffering, was worse. They rolled it out cautiously, with strict moderation and training modules. The guides had to pass tests on active listening, boundaries, and crisis response. Within weeks, the network grew. Guides became beacons for others, helping people navigate tough moves and holding space when emotions overwhelmed logic. Ava watched conversations that felt like lifelines, texts from users in the middle of panic, replies sent at 3 a.m., virtual hugs typed in emojis and words. She saw a woman in Ohio texting her guide after her father died unexpectedly. She saw a college student in Boston check in daily with her guide as she struggled with anxiety and loss. It was messy, imperfect, but it worked. The network was a tapestry of broken and healing hearts, threaded with resilience and hope. Ava felt the old fears creep back. Could this scale? Could they keep people safe? But she also saw the power of decentralizing care. Not replacing professionals, but supplementing them with peer connection. Tony built features to keep the network transparent and accountable, anonymous feedback loops, flags for potential crisis, community-led discussion forums. The team fostered a culture of radical kindness and responsibility. But the network effect wasn't just about technology. It was about culture, shifting the stigma around grief, trauma, and healing. The stories users shared publicly transformed the app into a movement. "I never thought I'd talk about my dad's suicide," one user wrote, "but here I found people who get it." Another shared how the app helped her set boundaries with a toxic friend for the first time. These stories traveled beyond the app, shared on social media, blogs, even local news. Ava found herself fielding emails from community leaders wanting to bring Gamify Grief's principles into schools, workplaces, and churches. They weren't just users anymore. They were advocates. The movement became bigger than the product. And that scared Ava. Because growth meant risk. Exposure meant criticism. The old voices, the doubters, the skeptics, returned with new intensity. A mental health watchdog group accused the app of gamifying trauma, calling for stricter regulation. Some users worried about privacy breaches as the network expanded. Ava wrestled with decisions about transparency and data security, navigating a maze of ethical dilemmas she hadn't anticipated. But through it all, the network held firm. Users formed local meetups, online book clubs, support chains. They created their own rituals, monthly check-in circles, virtual candlelight vigils, gratitude shares. Ava realized they had birthed something greater than code, a living, breathing community. The most powerful moment came when a user-led fundraising campaign raised enough money to sponsor free therapy sessions for low-income users. They named it Moves for Change. Ava was humbled and overwhelmed. She thought back to the lonely motel room, the notebook, the nights she felt invisible and powerless. Now she was part of a network that saved lives in ways no single app ever could. But the network effect had its own challenges. Maintaining balance between openness and safety, growth and intimacy, technology and humanity was a constant tightrope walk. Ava leaned heavily on May and Tony. May reminded her to listen to the community's voice, not just data points. Tony built tools that allowed users to co-create features, giving them ownership. Together they learned that community wasn't a feature you added, it was a relationship you nurtured. One night, Ava received a message that crystallized everything: "Your app didn't just save me. It gave me back my people." She smiled through tears. Because the secret Elon Musk never talked about, the real game theory behind beating life's challenges, was this: no one wins alone. The network effect was the ultimate strategy. Connect, support, grow. Because resilience isn't just individual. It's collective. And sometimes, the best move you can make is to reach out your hand, and let someone else hold it. Ava always admired Elon Musk's boldness, but she'd learned the hard way that courage without calculation can lead to ruin. After the network grew, and Gamify Grief became more than just an app, a movement, a community, Ava faced a new challenge: how to take risks that didn't just feel brave but were smart. The kind of risks that turned the tide instead of sinking the ship. It started with a pitch to a major investor who could propel the platform nationwide. The meeting was intense, high stakes, and full of those typical Silicon Valley power moves: quick questions, veiled doubts, and endless demands for metrics. Ava knew this moment could change everything. The offer was tempting but came with strings: more ads, data sharing clauses, and aggressive growth targets that threatened the community's delicate balance. Her gut said no. But the pressure was immense. May and Tony argued both sides fiercely: growth meant sustainability, but not at any cost. Ava realized this was a classic game theory problem: maximize payoff while minimizing loss. She dove into research, revisiting lessons she'd learned about strategic risk from Elon Musk's ventures, how he bet big on rockets and electric cars, yes, but only after testing, iterating, and building a team that could handle the fallout. She applied the same principle to Gamify Grief: how to identify calculated risks, not reckless gambles. She created a framework for decision-making: Step 1, define the goal clearly; Step 2, map out possible outcomes; Step 3, assess the probability and impact of each outcome; Step 4, prepare contingencies; Step 5, make the move. They called it the risk matrix. It became their new secret weapon. Instead of flying blind or freezing in fear, Ava and her team learned to take smart chances. They ran experiments, launching small feature pilots before full rollouts, gathering user feedback relentlessly, monitoring emotional responses closely. One bold move was introducing Live Connect, real-time group video sessions moderated by trained guides, to create immediate human connection. It felt risky because it added complexity and required more resources, but the payoff was enormous. Users reported feeling less isolated, more supported. The numbers backed it up. Engagement spiked, retention improved, and word-of-mouth referrals soared. But with every risk, Ava held a private fear: what if one misstep caused harm? What if a glitch or miscommunication triggered a crisis? She reminded herself of Musk's words: failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. That mantra echoed during the hardest decision yet: integrating AI-powered emotional insights to personalize moves. The tech was promising but untested in mental health at this scale. They beta tested with caution. Early results showed users felt more understood and supported, but some worried about privacy and losing the human touch. Ava faced a crossroads: push forward with innovation or slow down to protect intimacy. The risk matrix helped her weigh options systematically, but the decision was still gut-wrenching. Ultimately, she chose to proceed with transparency, giving users control over data and opting them into AI features rather than forcing it. The feedback loop remained open and honest. The move paid off, but it wasn't perfect. Technical glitches, skeptical users, and occasional backlash tested their resilience. Yet each failure became a lesson, a data point to refine the approach. Ava realized that calculated risk wasn't just about success or failure, it was about learning faster than the world changed around you. Outside the app, life tested Ava's risk muscles too. When an unexpected romantic interest appeared, someone who challenged her routines and beliefs, she hesitated. Past betrayals made her wary. But she applied the same risk matrix, weighing vulnerability against the chance for connection. She took a chance, cautiously opening her heart while keeping boundaries firm. It wasn't easy. Fear and hope tangled daily. But every risk, personal or professional, was a move in the game she was learning to master. She shared these lessons openly with the community, reminding users that risk was part of growth and healing. Calculated risk means owning your choices, she wrote in the app's blog. It means stepping forward, knowing the outcome isn't guaranteed, but trusting yourself to handle what comes. The philosophy resonated. One user wrote, "I was paralyzed by fear. This app taught me to take small risks and build courage." Another said, "Understanding risk helped me say goodbye to toxic people and reclaim my peace." Ava's new mindset transformed not just the app but her own life. She was no longer a survivor clinging to safety but a strategist moving boldly forward. She learned that beating life's challenges wasn't about avoiding failure but about choosing which risks were worth taking, and preparing to navigate the fallout with grace. Elon Musk's secret, she realized, wasn't just relentless ambition. It was the art of calculated risk, failing fast, learning faster, and always playing the long game. And Ava was ready to play. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ava had been grinding for years, long nights, endless revisions, and moments when quitting seemed like the only option. But everything changed the day they launched the app's new feature, the Adaptive Challenge Engine. It was a culmination of all their work on game theory, network effect, and calculated risks, a smart system that tailored each user's journey based on their unique emotional profile and choices. The launch wasn't flashy, there were no big headlines or viral moments at first. Just a quiet ripple of users who noticed something different. The app felt more alive, more human. It anticipated moods and moods shifted with it. For Ava, this breakthrough was deeply personal. She remembered the early days when grief felt like a weight pulling her under, a storm without a shore. She had longed for a guide that didn't just offer platitudes but could meet her in the chaos, respond to her confusion, and offer real, actionable steps. The Adaptive Challenge Engine was designed to do exactly that, for everyone. On launch day, Ava woke to dozens of messages from users who said things like, "I felt like the app knew me today," or, "It helped me take a step I didn't think I could." The feedback wasn't just positive, it was transformative. The engine analyzed patterns from thousands of users, learning which challenges empowered and which overwhelmed. It adjusted dynamically, suggesting smaller moves when stress was high and bigger risks when confidence grew. Ava and her team watched as user engagement soared, and more importantly, so did users' reported well-being. The engine was evolving, learning not just from data but from the subtle art of human resilience. For Ava, this breakthrough wasn't just technical, it was emotional. It was the moment she realized she had built something that could change lives, including her own. Around this time, Ava was invited to speak at a mental health conference in San Francisco. She shared the story of Gamify Grief, the hidden playbook, and the power of network support. Her presentation ended with a simple message: healing is a game we all play, but the rules aren't fixed. They're made by us, every day. The audience was moved. Afterward, a renowned psychologist approached her with a proposal for a research partnership to study the app's impact on trauma recovery scientifically. It was a validation Ava hadn't dared to hope for. But with success came new challenges. As more users poured in, the app's servers strained under demand. The team scrambled to scale infrastructure while keeping costs manageable. Ava grappled with the pressure, balancing rapid growth without losing the personal touch that made Gamify Grief special. Then came a crisis. A user suffered a severe breakdown during a live Connect session, triggering emergency intervention. It was a sobering reminder of the stakes involved. Ava and her team reviewed protocols, increased training, and invested in 24/7 crisis support partnerships. The event shook Ava but also reinforced her commitment. She knew the game they played wasn't without risk, but it was worth it. Behind the scenes, Ava's personal life reflected the breakthroughs she fostered professionally. She reconnected with her estranged sister after years of silence. It was messy, filled with raw emotions and old wounds, but they started rebuilding trust one honest conversation at a time. Ava realized that healing wasn't just about herself or users in the app. It was about restoring connections in the real world. The breakthrough was holistic. As the app grew, Ava kept refining the adaptive challenge engine, incorporating new psychological insights and user feedback. She launched reflection journals inside the app, spaces for users to record thoughts, track progress, and revisit moments of growth. The journals became a treasure trove of stories, snapshots of courage, pain, and triumph. One entry stood out. A woman wrote about finally forgiving herself after years of guilt. Another told of a man who chose to pursue his passion despite fear. Ava realized that the true breakthrough wasn't just the tech or network, it was the transformation unfolding quietly inside millions of hearts. She often reflected on Elon Musk's journey, how his breakthroughs came not from sudden luck but from relentless iteration, resilience, and vision. She saw parallels in her own path, proof that beating life's challenges required both grit and grace. One evening, Ava sat by her window overlooking the city lights, feeling a rare calm. She pulled out her original notebook, the one she scribbled in during her darkest nights. Flipping through the pages, she smiled at how far she'd come. The app was no longer just her project. It was a living testament to human strength and connection. The breakthrough was just the beginning. The game would continue, ever evolving, just like life. And Ava was ready to keep playing. Just when Ava thought she had found her rhythm, life threw her the kind of curveball no game theory or careful calculation could predict. It started with a phone call on a rainy Thursday afternoon, a call that shattered the fragile peace she'd been building. Her mother, who had always been a pillar of quiet strength, was diagnosed with a serious illness. The news hit Ava like a freight train. Suddenly, the calculated risks and adaptive strategies she'd honed felt useless in the face of raw human vulnerability. The mother-daughter relationship was complicated, layered with years of unspoken hurts and misunderstandings. Ava had spent most of her adult life trying to heal that fractured bond, but old wounds reopened like they never fully closed. Her mother's diagnosis forced Ava to confront not only the uncertainty of illness but the emotional baggage she'd long avoided. Suddenly, the stakes were deeply personal, and the algorithms that guided users through grief seemed insufficient for the complexity of her own pain. At the same time, the demands of running Gamify Grief intensified. The app's success attracted attention from bigger players in tech and mental health, sparking offers for partnerships and acquisitions. Ava found herself pulled in conflicting directions, devoted to her mother's care while steering the platform through a critical growth phase. Her team rallied around her, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily. May and Tony stepped up with leadership and support, reminding Ava she didn't have to carry it all alone. Ava leaned into the network effect personally, reaching out to close friends and mentors, accepting help in ways she never had before. The experience deepened her understanding of the very principles that Gamify Grief embodied. She lived the lesson that connection and vulnerability were not weaknesses but sources of strength. Meanwhile, the app itself encountered unexpected challenges. A wave of misinformation began spreading on social media, targeting mental health apps like theirs, accusing them of exploiting users for profit or trivializing serious conditions. The backlash created a tense atmosphere, with some users expressing doubts and others canceling subscriptions. Ava faced a new kind of crisis: how to protect the community's trust without compromising transparency. She responded with open communication, hosting live Q&A sessions and inviting experts to speak publicly about ethical tech and mental health care. Slowly, the tide turned, but the episode left a scar. Through it all, Ava's personal journey mirrored the app's challenges. As she cared for her mother through treatments and setbacks, Ava grappled with grief, hope, anger, and exhaustion. She journaled candidly in the app's own reflection feature, sharing raw entries with the community. Users responded with compassion and stories of their own struggles, creating a wave of shared empathy. One night, after a particularly hard day, Ava found solace in a virtual support group formed spontaneously by users experiencing family illness. She realized that no algorithm could predict the messy, unpredictable reality of life's toughest moments, but the human spirit could adapt and persevere. In the quiet hours, Ava reflected on Elon Musk's own unexpected challenges: the rockets that exploded, the near bankruptcy, the public criticism. She saw that resilience wasn't about perfection but persistence despite setbacks. This chapter of her life became a testament to that truth. The illness also prompted Ava to rethink some of the app's features. She worked with her team to add modules specifically for caregiving, chronic illness, and long-term emotional resilience. The app evolved again, recognizing that life's challenges were often layered and ongoing, not neat problems with clean solutions. Ava's relationship with her mother slowly shifted, too. Through vulnerability and shared struggle, they found moments of tenderness and understanding that had eluded them for years. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was real and human. Ava learned that sometimes facing the unexpected meant embracing uncertainty and allowing space for imperfect healing. The experience transformed her leadership. She became more patient, more empathetic, and more willing to listen, not just to users but to herself. She began to see the app less as a product and more as a platform for collective humanity, imperfect but necessary. When her mother's health stabilized enough for Ava to return focus to the company, she felt changed. The lessons of facing the unexpected were imprinted deeply in her approach to innovation, risk, and community. Ava realized that beating life's challenges wasn't about controlling outcomes but about adapting with courage and grace. Elon Musk's secret wasn't just strategic thinking, it was the willingness to face uncertainty head-on, to accept failure, and to keep moving forward. Ava embraced that secret fully, knowing the game wasn't over, it was just entering a new phase. And she was ready. In the weeks following her mother's stabilization, Ava found herself at a crossroads, not just in life, but in her vision for Gamify grief. The pressures of growth, the demands of leadership, and the weight of personal struggle had brought her to question the very meaning of success. Was success measured in millions of downloads, soaring revenue, or industry accolades? Or was it something deeper, something that transcended metrics and touched the human soul? This introspection wasn't sudden. It had been simmering beneath the surface for months, a quiet unrest that grew louder as Ava watched the app's community flourish and falter in equal measure. She realized that the traditional definitions of success, the Silicon Valley benchmarks of scaling fast and dominating markets, didn't fit the nuanced, fragile world of grief and healing. The app was more than a business, it was a lifeline for people navigating their darkest hours. Ava called a team retreat in a rustic cabin outside the city, a place away from screens and schedules where they could reconnect with their mission. Around a crackling fire, the team shared their hopes, doubts, and visions for what Gamify grief could be. May spoke about the power of empathy and the need to prioritize user well-being over growth at all costs. Tony stressed innovation but reminded everyone that technology was a tool, not a goal. Ava felt a shift within herself, a recalibration of priorities. They agreed on a new guiding principle: success would be measured by impact, not just numbers. They began redefining key performance indicators to include qualitative data, user stories, mental health improvements, community engagement, alongside traditional analytics. This shift required difficult decisions. Ava chose to slow down on aggressive marketing campaigns that felt intrusive or insincere. They redesigned monetization strategies to ensure accessibility, including tiered pricing and free services for vulnerable users. The company culture evolved, with more emphasis on mindfulness, work-life balance, and open communication. Ava shared her personal journey publicly in a heartfelt blog post titled, "What Success Really Means," which resonated widely. She wrote, "In the game of life, the highest score isn't wealth or fame. It's connection, growth, and compassion." The response was overwhelming. Users, partners, and even competitors praised the honesty and integrity of the approach. Some users wrote that the app felt less like a product and more like a trusted friend. Ava felt a profound sense of alignment between her values and her work, a rare harmony that made the long hours and sacrifices worthwhile. Redefining success also reshaped Ava's leadership style. She became more collaborative, inviting input from users and staff alike. Regular, listening sessions were instituted, where community voices shaped product development. This participatory approach deepened trust and fostered innovation. One unexpected outcome was the emergence of user ambassadors, passionate individuals who volunteered to support others, organize events, and advocate for mental health awareness. Ava recognized the power of grassroots movements, understanding that real change often starts with small, committed groups. Meanwhile, the app's new features reflected this evolved philosophy. They introduced gratitude challenges, encouraging users to focus on small joys amid hardship. They enhanced reflection journals, with prompts that emphasized resilience and self-compassion. They launched partnerships with nonprofit organizations to extend resources beyond the app. Ava also embraced a more balanced life. She reconnected with friends, took up yoga, and allowed herself time to rest without guilt. The lessons from her mother's illness had taught her that self-care was not selfish but essential. This personal growth fueled her professional passion. She found that when she nurtured herself, she brought more energy and clarity to her work. The shift wasn't without critics. Some investors worried that slowing growth would cost them market share. Certain team members struggled to adjust to new priorities. Ava addressed these challenges openly, emphasizing the long-term vision and values that grounded their mission. She negotiated with stakeholders to align incentives and foster shared commitment. Over time, the new model proved sustainable and effective. Gamify Grief became a beacon in the mental health tech space, not just for its innovation but for its heart. Ava was invited to speak at conferences about ethical entrepreneurship and compassionate leadership, sharing her story and the company's evolution. She realized that redefining success was not a retreat but a breakthrough, a courageous act of authenticity that resonated deeply. The journey taught her that beating life's challenges wasn't about chasing conventional markers but about creating meaning, embracing imperfection, and lifting others along the way. Elon Musk's game theory had taught her to think strategically, but it was this redefinition of success that gave her work purpose and soul. Ava was ready for the next chapter, grounded in wisdom and fueled by hope. Ava had always believed in the strength of individuals, but as Gamify Grief grew, she came to understand that true transformation came from connection, the invisible threads that bind people together in shared experience. The network effect was no longer just a theory, it was a living, breathing force within the app's community. Users who once felt isolated found themselves woven into a tapestry of support, encouragement, and hope. The power of community was undeniable, yet it also presented new challenges and responsibilities. Ava witnessed firsthand how collective energy could lift someone out of despair, but she also saw the risks of group dynamics, conflict, misinformation, and the potential for exclusion. She realized that building a healthy, resilient community required intentional care, much like tending a garden. To nurture this ecosystem, Ava and her team developed features that encouraged authentic interaction while safeguarding emotional safety. They introduced circle groups, smaller, moderated spaces within the app where users with similar experiences could connect more deeply. These groups became sanctuaries where people shared stories, celebrated milestones, and leaned on one another during setbacks. Ava facilitated training programs for volunteer moderators, equipping them with skills in empathy, active listening, and crisis management. This decentralized leadership empowered users to take ownership of their healing journey and fostered a culture of mutual respect. The community's impact rippled beyond the app. Inspired by stories shared within Gamify Grief, users organized local meetups, workshops, and support networks. Ava attended several of these events, meeting users face-to-face and witnessing the profound bonds formed offline. One meetup in Chicago particularly moved her. A diverse group of strangers had come together in a small cafe, united by their shared struggles and victories. They expressed gratitude for the app but emphasized that the human connection, the smiles, the hugs, the shared tears, was irreplaceable. Ava realized that technology was a bridge, not the destination. The power of community lay in human hearts reaching across distances and differences. This realization shaped the next evolution of Gamify Grief. Ava spearheaded initiatives to integrate more community-driven content. User stories, peer advice, collaborative challenges, into the app's core experience. She invited users to co-create features, reinforcing a sense of belonging and shared purpose. The app became a platform not only for individual healing but for collective empowerment. But with growth came complexity. Conflicts occasionally erupted within groups, misunderstandings, hurt feelings, differing opinions. Ava faced tough decisions about moderation and the balance between freedom of expression and community safety. She engaged experts in online behavior and ethics to guide policies, striving to create a space where diversity was celebrated and kindness was the rule. These efforts were tested when a user shared a deeply controversial opinion that sparked heated debate. The incident forced Ava to confront the limits of community tolerance and the challenge of holding space for difficult conversations without allowing harm. After hours of reflection and discussion with her team, she crafted a thoughtful response emphasizing empathy, education, and respect. The community responded with maturity and compassion, turning the incident into a learning moment rather than a fracture. Ava's leadership in navigating these challenges earned her respect and strengthened the community's resilience. She learned that the power of community wasn't just in harmony but also in the ability to weather storms together. Beyond the app, Ava's understanding of community influenced her personal relationships. She rekindled friendships she had neglected and deepened connections with family. The support she gave and received enriched her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. Ava often thought of Elon Musk's ventures. How his teams, from SpaceX engineers to Tesla designers, functioned as communities of innovators driven by shared vision and trust. She saw parallels in her own work. The game of life was never solitary. It was a multiplayer experience. One afternoon, Ava hosted a live-streamed, community celebration, inviting users, team members, and experts to share stories and insights. The event was filled with laughter, tears, and a palpable sense of hope. Ava closed the session with a message that had become her mantra: alone we can endure, but together we thrive. As the app entered its next phase, Ava remained committed to nurturing the delicate balance of technology and humanity, innovation and compassion. She knew that the power of community was the secret weapon in beating life's challenges, an unbreakable network of hearts playing the same game, with love as their ultimate strategy. And in that truth, Ava found her deepest fulfillment. As Gamify Grief continued to grow, Ava found herself in the eye of a storm that tested not just her leadership but the very core of her vision. The mental health tech space was becoming increasingly crowded, with competitors rushing to capitalize on the growing demand for digital support. Venture capitalists were pressing for faster expansion and higher returns, pushing Ava and her team to accelerate innovation under intense pressure. Ava understood the necessity of growth but refused to sacrifice the app's mission for short-term gains. Balancing innovation with integrity became a daily challenge. She held firm to the principle that every new feature must serve the community's well-being, not just boost engagement metrics. To navigate this, Ava implemented a rigorous impact review process, involving psychologists, user representatives, and data scientists to evaluate potential updates. This method slowed some releases but ensured that changes were thoughtful and aligned with their values. One of the most ambitious projects was the integration of AI-powered emotional analytics, tools that could detect subtle shifts in user mood from text inputs, voice tone, and usage patterns. The goal was to personalize support in real time, offering timely interventions and encouragement tailored to each individual's emotional state. Developing this technology was complex and fraught with ethical considerations. Ava convened advisory boards including ethicists and mental health professionals to guide implementation and protect user privacy. When initial beta tests revealed some users felt uneasy about AI reading their emotions, Ava led transparent conversations about data security and the limits of automation. She reassured the community that human connection remained central and that AI was a tool to enhance, not replace, human empathy. Despite these efforts, the pressure intensified when a high-profile media outlet published a critical article questioning the effectiveness and ethics of AI in mental health apps. The story sparked debate and user anxiety. Ava responded swiftly, hosting a live panel discussion with experts and users to address concerns openly. She acknowledged the imperfections of the technology and committed to ongoing oversight and user empowerment. The response restored trust but reminded Ava of the fragile balance they maintained. At the same time, Ava's personal life reflected the mounting pressures. She grappled with burnout and self-doubt, moments when the weight of expectations felt overwhelming. Yet she found strength in the very principles she preached: resilience, connection, and purpose. She took deliberate steps to prioritize mental health for herself and her team, instituting wellness programs and encouraging openness about struggles. Ava also tapped into Elon Musk's example of relentless iteration, viewing setbacks not as failures but as data points guiding the next move. She embraced a mindset of learning and adaptation, cultivating a culture where experimentation was encouraged and mistakes were seen as opportunities. The team rallied, fueled by a shared commitment to innovation with heart. They launched a series of updates incorporating user feedback and AI insights, improving the app's responsiveness and emotional attunement. Users reported feeling more understood and supported than ever before. Ava celebrated these wins but remained vigilant. She knew that innovation under pressure required constant reflection and humility. The journey wasn't linear. It was a dynamic dance between technology, ethics, and human experience. One breakthrough came when the app's AI detected early signs of relapse in a user struggling with depression, prompting timely outreach and connection to professional help. Stories like this reaffirmed Ava's belief in the power of thoughtful innovation. As she stood at the crossroads of technology and humanity, Ava recognized that beating life's challenges meant embracing complexity and uncertainty with courage and care. Elon Musk's game theory had taught her to strategize boldly, but it was innovation tempered by empathy that made all the difference. In this crucible of pressure and possibility, Ava found her true strength, and a vision for a future where technology and compassion coexisted to heal and empower. Failure was never part of the plan, yet it became one of Ava's most powerful teachers. In the high-stakes world of startups and innovation, setbacks weren't just possibilities, they were inevitabilities. Early on, Ava had internalized Elon Musk's approach to failure as a necessary step toward ultimate success, but living it was a different matter. The first major failure came with the launch of an ambitious feature designed to gamify coping strategies. The idea was to reward users with points and badges for completing daily mental health exercises, boosting engagement and motivation. However, the rollout was rushed to meet investor deadlines, and the feature backfired. Users reported feeling pressured, even judged, and some disengaged altogether. Feedback was blunt and painful. Ava was forced to pull the feature and issue an apology to the community. The experience was humbling. It exposed a disconnect between the leadership's assumptions and the users' lived experiences. Ava realized that good intentions alone couldn't guarantee success. She committed to a new ethos: listen first, act second. This shift transformed product development into a deeply collaborative process with the community at the center. Another failure struck when a strategic partnership with a large wellness corporation fell apart. The deal promised resources and visibility but ultimately crumbled over conflicting values and misaligned goals. Ava was left scrambling to reassure her team and users that the company's mission remained intact. This setback was a painful reminder that not all growth was healthy growth. Ava doubled down on building a sustainable company culture rooted in authenticity and transparency. She shared these stories openly in talks and interviews, breaking the silence around failure in entrepreneurship. She spoke about the emotional toll, the doubts, the loneliness, the fear of letting others down, and how facing those feelings was part of the journey. These candid admissions resonated with many, creating a new kind of connection between leader and community. Ava's approach to failure evolved from avoidance to embrace. She reframed each setback as data, feedback, and opportunity. When a pilot program in schools failed to gain traction, the team conducted deep analysis and user interviews to understand the barriers. They discovered that rigid curricula and limited teacher buy-in hindered success. Rather than abandon the idea, Ava's team pivoted to create flexible tools that teachers could adapt to their classrooms, leading to better adoption over time. Failure became the crucible for creativity. Ava encouraged her team to experiment boldly while maintaining a safety net of reflection and iteration. She instituted regular failure postmortems, not to assign blame but to learn and grow together. This culture shift fostered psychological safety, empowering team members to speak up and innovate without fear. Personally, Ava found that failure deepened her empathy. She understood that users struggling with grief and mental health were navigating a world where setbacks and relapses were part of healing. This perspective influenced product design. Features became more forgiving, encouraging users to try again without shame. Ava's own relationship with failure was still a work in progress. There were moments of frustration and self-criticism, but over time, she cultivated resilience and self-compassion. She meditated regularly, practiced journaling, and sought support from mentors and peers. Elon Musk's famous perseverance inspired her, but she adapted his grit to her own style. One that valued rest and reflection as much as relentless drive. The ultimate lesson Ava learned was that failure was not the opposite of success but a vital part of it. Each misstep, each detour, was a move forward on a complex path. This mindset freed her from the paralysis of perfectionism and fueled a more authentic, sustainable leadership. When Gamify Grief finally launched its revamped gamification feature, now redesigned with community input and psychological insight, it was met with enthusiasm and gratitude. Users appreciated the respectful approach that honored their pace and needs. Ava smiled, knowing that the journey to this success had been paved with valuable failures. She shared this insight in her keynote speech at a major tech conference, concluding with a line that echoed through the audience: "Failure is not the end of the game. It's a reset button that gives us the chance to play smarter, kinder, and stronger." Through these lessons, Ava had grown not just as an entrepreneur but as a person. She saw that beating life's challenges meant embracing vulnerability and imperfection, trusting the process, and moving forward with courage. In that, she found a deeper victory than any scoreboard could show. In the relentless pace of building Gamify Grief, Ava's life had begun to feel like a high-wire act without a safety net. The excitement of innovation and the fulfillment of mission were tempered by exhaustion and the constant tug of competing demands. She found herself caught between the ideal of making a difference and the reality of burnout, a tension many entrepreneurs face but few openly admit. The struggle to find balance became a central chapter in Ava's journey. It wasn't just about managing time but about aligning her energy, priorities, and values in a way that felt sustainable and authentic. Early on, Ava had modeled her work ethic after Elon Musk's famously grueling schedule. Sleeping only a few hours a night, pushing through fatigue with sheer willpower. But the consequences were unavoidable: decreased focus, irritability, and a growing distance from the people she loved. A wake-up call came when Ava fainted during a late-night coding session. The incident forced her to pause and reevaluate her approach. She realized that to lead effectively and live fully, she needed to honor her physical and emotional needs. Ava began experimenting with new routines. She incorporated daily meditation and yoga to calm her mind and body. She established strict boundaries around work hours, carving out time for family, friends, and hobbies. These changes weren't easy, they felt foreign at first, even indulgent. But gradually, Ava noticed improvements, not just in her health but in creativity, resilience, and decision-making. She shared her journey with her team, encouraging a culture where well-being was prioritized alongside productivity. This cultural shift was transformative. Team members felt more supported and less pressured, leading to higher morale and better collaboration. Ava introduced flexible schedules and mental health days, recognizing that rest was an investment in sustainable success. She also embraced the power of delegation, learning to trust her leadership team with responsibilities she had previously shouldered alone. This was a difficult but necessary step toward balance. Personally, Ava rekindled relationships that had frayed under the weight of work. She made time for weekly dinners with her parents and reconnected with old friends through phone calls and weekend getaways. These moments grounded her, reminding her that life's richness extended beyond the office walls. The challenge of balance extended into Ava's internal world as well. She grappled with the tension between ambition and contentment, the desire to push forward and the need to appreciate the present. Meditation helped her cultivate mindfulness, a practice of observing thoughts and feelings without judgment. This practice deepened her self-awareness and compassion. Ava also began journaling daily, using the practice to process emotions, clarify intentions, and celebrate small victories. These rituals became anchors in the turbulent sea of startup life. The broader impact of Ava's journey toward balance rippled through Gamify Grief's development. The app itself evolved to support users in cultivating balance in their lives. Features such as mindful moments, gentle reminders to pause and breathe, and work-life harmony challenges encouraged users to integrate self-care into their routines. Ava collaborated with experts in work-life psychology to ensure these tools were grounded in science and empathy. Through these efforts, Ava saw how balance was not a static state but a dynamic dance, a continuous adjustment in response to changing circumstances. This understanding infused her leadership with flexibility and grace. She learned to celebrate progress rather than perfection, to embrace setbacks as opportunities for recalibration. Ava's story of finding balance resonated widely. In interviews and talks, she shared candid reflections about the costs of overwork and the power of self-care. Her message was clear: to beat life's challenges, we must honor our humanity and build lives that nourish body, mind, and soul. As she integrated these lessons, Ava's confidence grew, not from external validation but from a deep sense of alignment. She was no longer chasing a narrow definition of success but cultivating a life rich with meaning, connection, and joy. The path ahead remained full of challenges, but Ava faced it with renewed energy and clarity. In embracing balance, she found not weakness but strength, a powerful game strategy that could sustain her through the ups and downs of life. Elon Musk's game theory taught her to think several moves ahead, but balance taught her to stay present, grounded, and whole. This harmony became her secret to enduring the game of life with grace and resilience. For Ava, the breakthrough moment was less a sudden epiphany and more the culmination of years of struggle, perseverance, and incremental progress. It was the point when all the pieces of her vision, her leadership, and her relentless game-playing mindset converged into something transformative, not just for her but for the community she had built. The breakthrough arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, during a routine user feedback session. Ava and her team were reviewing responses from a diverse group of users who had been testing the newest features of Gamify Grief. One comment stood out, a heartfelt message from a woman named Claire who shared how the app had helped her navigate the devastating loss of her husband. Claire's words were raw and honest. She spoke of feeling hopeless and isolated, then discovering the app's supportive community and personalized challenges that helped her find small moments of joy and purpose again. Reading Claire's story, Ava felt a profound surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and renewed purpose. It was a reminder of why she had embarked on this journey in the first place. The breakthrough wasn't a flashy new feature or a viral marketing campaign, it was the lived impact on real people. This moment crystallized Ava's understanding that success was measured not in downloads or dollars but in lives changed. Motivated by this insight, Ava pushed the team to deepen the app's focus on meaningful connections. They developed new tools to facilitate peer mentorship, matching users who were further along in their healing journey with those just starting out. These healing partners provided personalized support and companionship, creating a ripple effect of care throughout the community. Ava also invested in storytelling, inviting users like Claire to share their journeys through videos and blog posts. These stories humanized the app and created powerful touchpoints for new users seeking hope. The response was overwhelming. Engagement soared as users found inspiration and validation in each other's experiences. Ava felt a renewed energy and clarity in her leadership. She understood that the real breakthrough was the shift from a product to a movement, a collective endeavor to transform grief and mental health through empathy, innovation, and community. Around the same time, Ava experienced a personal breakthrough. After months of balancing work, self-care, and relationships, she recognized that she no longer defined herself solely by her achievements or struggles. She had grown into a leader who embraced vulnerability, welcomed imperfection, and valued connection above competition. This internal transformation gave her the confidence to take bolder risks and to lead with authenticity. The breakthrough also brought new challenges. As Gamify Grief's visibility increased, Ava faced scrutiny and criticism from skeptics questioning the app's efficacy and data privacy. Some accused her of commodifying grief or oversimplifying complex emotions. Ava welcomed the critique as an opportunity to engage in dialogue and improve. She opened the app's data and research to independent review, collaborating with academic institutions to validate outcomes and enhance transparency. This openness strengthened trust and underscored her commitment to ethical innovation. The breakthrough moment, then, was not a final destination but a gateway to greater responsibility and impact. Ava realized that beating life's challenges was an ongoing game, requiring constant adaptation, humility, and courage. She embraced this mindset, seeing obstacles as invitations to evolve. Inspired by Elon Musk's persistence and strategic thinking, Ava began planning the next phases of expansion, exploring partnerships with healthcare providers, integrating emerging technologies like virtual reality for immersive healing experiences, and advocating for mental health policy reform. Each initiative was guided by the core principles that had driven her from the start: empathy, community, and thoughtful innovation. Ava's breakthrough moment was also shared with the team, whose dedication and resilience had been indispensable. She celebrated their contributions openly, fostering a culture of gratitude and shared purpose. This collective spirit fueled further creativity and commitment. In reflection, Ava saw that the breakthrough was the natural result of embracing complexity, learning from failure, and balancing ambition with care. It was the victory of a game well played, not a solo win but a team triumph. The journey ahead remained challenging and uncertain, but Ava faced it with a steady heart and a clear vision. The secret to beating life's challenges was not in avoiding adversity but in harnessing it as a catalyst for growth and connection. And in that breakthrough, Ava found not only success but meaning, fulfillment, and hope. Ava knew, deep in her bones, that the foundation of Gamify Grief's success wasn't technology or innovation alone, it was connection. The simple, profound human connection that had the power to heal wounds that no algorithm could fix. After years of building and refining the app, Ava's greatest realization was that people needed each other far more than they needed a clever game or a digital tool. Early in the company's journey, Ava had focused heavily on the features, the gamification mechanics, and the AI-driven analytics. Those elements were critical, but she began to see that users craved real relationships, authentic bonds formed through shared vulnerability. Ava remembered a particular user story that changed her perspective. Sarah, a young woman struggling with the recent loss of her mother, reached out during a live support session. She spoke about the crushing loneliness she felt despite being surrounded by family and friends. Her words echoed a painful truth. Grief was isolating, even in the presence of others. From that moment, Ava championed the development of community features within the app that encouraged peer-to-peer support. The Healing Partners program blossomed into something far beyond its initial design. Users formed lasting friendships, weekly group chats, and even met in person. Ava witnessed these connections blossoming into a vital lifeline for many. The team built new tools to facilitate connection in creative ways: virtual support groups, live guided meditation sessions, and interactive storytelling workshops. Each feature was designed to foster empathy and understanding. Ava invited mental health professionals to moderate and support these spaces, ensuring safety and inclusivity. The app became less about solo coping and more about collective resilience. Ava also recognized that connection extended beyond the users to encompass the broader ecosystem of mental health care. She forged partnerships with therapists, counselors, and nonprofit organizations, creating a network of support that bridged the gap between digital and human care. These collaborations allowed users to access professional help seamlessly when needed, blending technology and personal touch. In the wider world, Ava's message about the power of connection resonated deeply. She spoke at conferences, emphasizing that in an age of digital isolation, true healing required intentional relationships. Her own story, of struggling with loneliness and finding strength through community, inspired many. Behind the scenes, Ava nurtured her own connections with family and friends, understanding that leadership was not a solitary pursuit. She leaned on her partner and close friends during tough times, modeling vulnerability and mutual support. These relationships were a source of grounding and joy amid the chaos. The ripple effects of connection extended into the culture of gamified grief itself. Ava fostered an environment where team members supported each other, celebrated diversity, and shared openly about challenges. This culture of belonging fueled creativity and resilience. The power of connection was not just a feature but a philosophy that shaped every aspect of the company. Ava often reflected on Elon Musk's strategic mind, recognizing that while technology could solve many problems, it was connection that unlocked human potential. The interplay between innovation and empathy was the secret formula. As the app continued to grow, Ava and her team documented stories of transformation, users who had rebuilt their lives, formed new families of support, and discovered hope where they once saw only despair. These stories became a testament to the enduring power of connection. Ava's vision extended beyond grief to the broader human experience, advocating for a world where technology amplified, not replaced, the bonds that make us whole. In embracing connection, Ava found a deeper meaning to her work. She realized that beating life's challenges wasn't about going it alone but about reaching out, leaning in, and walking together through the hardest moments. This truth became the heart of gamified grief and Ava's legacy, a reminder that in the game of life, we're strongest when we play as a team. Ava's journey with gamified grief was approaching a new chapter, one where her role as a leader and her impact on the world began to take on a broader meaning. The startup that started as a personal mission had grown into a movement, and with growth came the responsibility to think not only about immediate success but about legacy. Leadership, Ava realized, was no longer just about steering a company, it was about inspiring others to carry forward a vision of hope, resilience, and empathy. From the beginning, Ava had admired Elon Musk's leadership style. His vision, his boldness, and his willingness to take risks. But over time, she understood that leadership had to be adapted to her own values and context. Musk's relentless drive was tempered by Ava's emphasis on compassion and balance. She saw leadership as a service, a way to empower others to be their best selves while staying true to the company's mission. Ava began mentoring emerging leaders within gamified grief, cultivating a new generation of innovators who shared her commitment to ethical entrepreneurship. She invested in leadership development programs that emphasized emotional intelligence, diversity, and inclusivity. Ava wanted to create a leadership culture that valued listening as much as speaking, collaboration as much as competition. She knew that the challenges ahead would require collective wisdom and humility. As Gamify Grief expanded globally, Ava navigated the complexities of scaling a mission-driven company. She balanced the pressures of investors and market demands with the core values that had shaped the company's identity. This balancing act was delicate and ongoing, requiring clarity, courage, and negotiation. Ava's leadership was tested during moments of crisis, from public criticism to technical failures, but she faced each with transparency and resilience. She communicated openly with her team and users, reinforcing trust and solidarity. Ava also embraced the role of advocate beyond her company, speaking out on issues of mental health stigma, technology ethics, and social responsibility. She collaborated with policymakers and thought leaders to promote systemic change. Through these efforts, Ava's influence extended beyond the tech world, touching the broader cultural conversation about healing and human connection. Reflecting on her legacy, Ava thought about the kind of impact she wanted to leave. It wasn't just about financial success or accolades but about creating something enduring that uplifted individuals and communities. She envisioned a future where grief was met with understanding, where technology was a tool for healing, and where leadership was defined by empathy and courage. Ava also considered her personal legacy, how she had grown through hardship, learned from failure, and found strength in vulnerability. She wanted to be remembered as a leader who cared deeply, who inspired change through example, and who never lost sight of the humanity at the heart of innovation. This vision shaped her decisions and priorities. Ava committed to sustainability, ensuring that Gamify Grief's growth would honor environmental and social responsibility. She fostered partnerships with nonprofit organizations, schools, and healthcare providers to broaden access and impact. Ava knew that true legacy was built on community and collaboration. The leadership lessons Ava had learned echoed Musk's game theory principles but evolved into a more nuanced approach: anticipate moves ahead, embrace complexity, and value every player in the game. She taught that leadership was less about control and more about trust, less about winning and more about serving. As she prepared for the next phase of her life and career, Ava felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose. The challenges she had faced had forged her into a leader capable of navigating uncertainty with grace. Her legacy was still unfolding, but its foundation was strong, a testament to resilience, connection, and the transformative power of leadership grounded in love. In the end, Ava's story was not just about beating life's challenges but about changing the game itself. She had turned grief into growth, pain into possibility, and a solitary struggle into a shared journey. This was the leadership she aspired to: bold, compassionate, and enduring. As Ava approached the culmination of her journey with Gamify Grief, she reflected deeply on the game she had been playing all these years, the complex, unpredictable game of life itself. Every challenge, every setback, every victory had been a move on a vast, unfolding board. The lessons she'd learned, inspired by Elon Musk's game theory approach but transformed by her own experiences, now crystallized into a final truth: life's ultimate move was not about control or conquest but about acceptance and meaning. Ava had always believed in strategy, anticipating obstacles, planning several steps ahead, and adapting quickly to change. Yet, she came to realize that some of life's most profound moments were not scripted moves but surprises, moments that demanded presence rather than prediction. The final move was to surrender, not in defeat, but in trust. Trust in the process, trust in others, and trust in herself. This surrender was a paradoxical strength, a conscious choice to let go of what she couldn't control and to fully embrace what was. The journey that began with a desire to help others heal from grief had become her own healing path. Ava's personal losses, the deaths of loved ones, the strain of sacrifice, the loneliness of leadership, had shaped her deeply. But through these hardships, she discovered resilience and compassion that no strategy could manufacture alone. The final move was to honor the entirety of her story, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures, as integral parts of the game. Ava's work with Gamify Grief had changed countless lives, but it also changed her. She embraced a new chapter where success was defined by authenticity and connection rather than accolades or growth metrics. She stepped back from day-to-day operations to mentor others, support emerging leaders, and advocate for mental health on a global scale. This transition was both an ending and a beginning. Ava understood that endings were necessary to make space for new moves, new games, and new possibilities. She shared this wisdom openly with her community, encouraging users to see their own lives as evolving journeys filled with choices and chances to grow. Ava's story came full circle when she reunited with Claire, the woman whose feedback had sparked the breakthrough moment years earlier. They met in a sunlit cafe, sharing stories of healing and hope. Claire spoke of how Gamify Grief had given her the courage to start a nonprofit supporting widows, turning her pain into purpose. Ava felt a profound sense of fulfillment knowing that the movement she helped build was now empowering others to lead and heal. The final move in Ava's life game was a lesson in humility and grace. It was a recognition that despite all her planning and effort, some outcomes were beyond her control, and that was okay. What mattered was the intention, the heart behind each move. As she looked ahead, Ava felt a quiet excitement. The game was never over, it simply evolved. Her legacy would live on in the connections made, the lives touched, and the hope kindled. Life's final move, she realized, was a continuous invitation, to play with courage, to love fiercely, and to embrace every moment as a chance to begin again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?